The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. On yesterday's episode, we started a conversation with Holly and Kurt Johnson, and they are serving as Nazarene Ministries in Poland today. But before that, they had lives and careers here in the United States, and they were doing things as a family. And at one point, God just moved on them that they needed to take another step. And as you know, here at Shepherd, our challenge is always to take our next step towards Jesus. So we're talking to them again today and finding out how that story developed for them. So welcome back in, Kurt and Holly.
Thank you.
We got to talking a little bit, and at the end of yesterday's episode, we were starting to talk about how you guys started going on prayer walks as a family and praying for your neighborhood, and then that kind of developed into you having coffee with people. And at this time, correct me if I'm wrong, so Kurt's working in education, and you're starting to develop this idea of going into a ministry. Is that right?
So before we came to Poland, I was working in education, and Holly was part of a local cafe in our town that it wasn't necessarily a Christian cafe. She could probably speak to it better than I could, but it was focused on serving the foster youth. And so the cafe was very intentional with finding kids in the foster care system right around that age between, early adolescence and teenage years, and just trying to, kind of equip them with some skills in the workforce to prepare them better, because at a certain point, they're going to exit the foster care system. And so the cafe served as a way just to kind of, equip the kids with, some communication skills, some relational skills, some business skills, things like that. And so Holly was part of that cafe, but it was a full functioning business on the outside. And then it had its own special ministry kind of on the inside. And that's kind of similar to what we're doing here in Poland as well.
And as a family, at what point did we say we need to take this on the road? Going from that leap from how you were ministering as a family in your local neighborhood to how do we go? We're going to go global now, and this is what God is calling us to. How did that leap happen?
I mean, I think we had a conversation at one point where we both had felt this call to missions, and really, so our first one, we went to Denmark, but prior to that, there was just one day where, he had told me, I felt this call to missions as well. And we were like, well, let's fill out the paperwork. So we got about halfway through the paperwork, and then I don't know why we stopped at that point, but then it was like we prayed about it for a while and spent some time before we actually came back, finished the paperwork, and I think there was just this almost a sense of urgency, like we need to sell our house, we need to get ready, but we didn't have anything on the horizon. We just felt this sense of we've got to start getting some things together now. And so at that time, I wasn't working with that coffee house ministry, but I was connected from my prayer walks in the neighborhood with the girl that started that coffee house ministry. So I knew her as a neighbor. And then we moved overseas to Denmark. When we came back, I worked with her in that foster care, coffee house ministry. So we did that in that period of time before we came back to Poland.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Kurt, you had mentioned, you grew up as a pastor's kid. So when this came time that you were ready to apply to be used in the mission field, Did you already know what to do from that aspect? Like, hey, I'll just tell my dad, or what was the actual mechanical process of trying to get into missions work?
The Church of the Nazarene, they have ministry opportunities or missions opportunities posted to their website. And, you can go online and you can look at different ministries, and there might be one that, kind of you connect with. And that's how we found, the application form or the interest form to fill out. And I think that they may have emailed us back and said, hey, it looks like you only completed half of this, later on down the line. But it was always something that, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's like it is a calling. It's like an itch, it's like something that's just kind of not going away. It's there. And so, we wanted to be in a position that, when the time came, we would be ready to serve, however that might look, So that meant selling things. That meant, financially putting us in a place where, we didn't have debt, things like that would hinder our ability to serve. Just kind of things like that. Even though we didn't know where we're going to serve or what it would look like, we wanted to be in a position really to kind of give God our all.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's such a cool narrative as far as like the steps that you took to say, okay, I'm so serious about answering this call that I recognize that there's some things in my life that I kind of need to put in order. God was showing you some things that you needed to do. And these are not small steps. I mean, you already have kids, you have an established family, and you're saying, okay, well, we got to figure out how we can sell our house. We got to figure out how we can just get debt free and pretty much get untangled from everything in this world right now so that we can be used in any way that God sees fit to use us. And doing that, not knowing exactly what it is that's going to be next, but just knowing there is a next thing coming. What a great challenge to many of us that, we hear things in the background like maybe God's wanting me to do this. Maybe he wants me to stop and talk to this person. Maybe he wants me to go to my neighbor. And that might be a little intimidating for us. But to realize that, if you want to see God do something phenomenal in your life, there's a cost to be paid. And you have to be willing to step out and say, okay, God, I'm going to show you how serious I am. And, when you guys put that sign in front of the house to say it was for sale, that was real, right?
Yeah. And that was before we found out anything about where we were going. We had submitted applications, but I remember like when we put our home on the market, it almost felt like a faith step, like saying like, we know this is where you're guiding us, that you're guiding us to doing this. We just don't know where we're going yet. And it felt a little bit to me like Abraham, where God said go, but he didn't know where he was going. So, yeah.
All right.
I was reminded.
So at some point then, the arrangements are made that you're going to be headed to Poland. So I guess, Kurt, you didn't have to worry about it being Africa. At least at this point in your life, you don't. Who knows what God has in mind next. But how did it come about that Poland was going to be the target for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, they called and there was 2 areas of need in Poland. And when they told us the 2, the first one they explained to us, and I just was like thinking like, I don't think that's it. We're just kind of praying as they're sharing with us what's available. The second one was a coffee house, and we just knew like, this is it. I felt such a peace about that. And then when we got off the phone, we talked about it and prayed about it. We both felt a peace about this coffee shop. And the one that we're at is Sweet Surrender. And there's been several Sweet Surrenders around Poland, and then the one in Denmark as well. And so this was the first and original one. And it really it feels so amazing to be here in what kind of feels like our church's birthplace of Coffee House Ministries. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk coffee for a second. Is the coffee the same over there as it is here, or do the coffee shops have to be a little different over there? Are they a little pickier about their coffee or not as picky about their coffee? I mean, in full disclosure, I walk into a Starbucks and I am small black coffee. That's it, But tell me a little bit about the coffee culture over there in Poland.
Well, it doesn't have as much sugar. It's much more classic, I would say. The cappuccinos, flat whites, lattes, espressos, if there is any like sweet coffee drink added, it's the Americans have brought the ideas for that one. So it's a little bit different in that way. But yeah, I would say people are just as particular about their coffee here, but I have noticed that, it's much more classic style and not so much, all the sugar and the, sweets.
I think I would probably get along all right with that. So maybe, Kurt, if you wanted to address this, if you could talk a little bit about kind of the status of kind of the spiritual climate as you're coming into Poland, and a little bit about, what does the Nazarene Church have established in Poland, and where is it headed in that area?
And so, every time you give to your local Nazarene church, portion of that money goes to the World Evangelism Fund. And so the Church of the Nazarene, through the World Evangelism Fund, 20 years ago, they were able to buy this property. And so now this property it's had different forms over the years. At one point, I think it was an internet cafe back when, the internet was just kind of becoming popular. But now it's a full functional coffee shop. And so, here in Poland, the spiritual climate, it's after World War II, a lot of the Protestants left. That the Protestant churches no longer existed. A lot of people went back to Germany, and so the Catholic Church kind of filled that void that was left. So, here in Poland, it's about 95% Catholic. The younger generation doesn't really have much to do with their faith, and so the coffee shop serves as that space where somebody who doesn't want to step foot into a church, they will come to a cafe to have a conversation, or even if they're not there to have, a conversation, or they haven't been invited by us to talk about something, we're still able to make connections with them and just, let them know that, we care about them and demonstrate the love of Christ to them. But also in terms of the cafe too, we try to be very intentional about how we treat the cafe too, because essentially, we want to see it almost as a church. And so just like a church, you're not going to let anything, any business or outside entity come into a church, right? You're not going to let Arbonne probably come into your church and sell things. And so we try to approach the cafe the same way, just being very intentional about our mission and purpose. And, we're church planning as well. And so the ultimate goal is to have a congregation in here, and the congregation then deciding, the Church of the Nazarene congregation deciding what they want that space to be in terms of their ministry. So that's kind of our path for that.
Yeah, and if you would, either one of you, speak a little bit to the idea of not just a bunch of American Nazarenes going over there and planning a church that we hold kind of American Nazarene church in and invite Polish people to, but instead having something that is organically a Polish Nazarene church.
Yeah, this is actually a really big thing for us, because we would like to see a Polish congregation started here, and we don't want it to go away when we work ourselves out of a job, which is what the missionaries are supposed to do, is work yourself out of a job. So we've been making connections with the Polish people because we believe that the Polish nationals beginning to take responsibility for this space and what God wants to do through the Nazarene Church here is what is going to keep it here long term. So we're making connections. We want to see it established so that they can grow this ministry, and we would like to plant more churches around Poland as well. So if we get one planted here, we would like to plant more in some other places, and we want to pass it to the nationals because we believe they're going to be able to care for it a lot longer than we could.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And if you could speak to a little bit, I think recently you've been starting in that vein of having a church plant, the worship nights and so forth. How's that going?
We had our first one last week, and it was so good. We had 60 people here. We had an overflow room. The room that it was originally it was packed. Just every spot that could be taken in that room was taken, and it was beautiful. And not only was it just amazing that night, but we've had so many people say, "I didn't know you guys were doing worship nights here," and so. The group that came and helped us that night, they're planning on being here once a month, but we're wanting to fill in other people to worship. And something that we really love about the Polish culture is they're very much into the arts. They love music. They love art. And this is a way we want to connect. And so many Polish people, their worship is so beautiful, and they come up with their own songs. They're not just singing, they sing some of our American songs in their language, but they're coming up with their own music, and it's really beautiful. So we really want to highlight that. We want them to write for their what God is speaking to them about their country, their hearts, and what He wants to do here in Poland. So I'm really excited about the worship nights. I think it's actually a birth of something much greater than just a worship night in our space. Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. If you could, as we start to wrap up here, if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some of the challenges you're facing and some things we can be praying for as we want to support you guys.
Yeah.
I would say language learning. They say Polish is the third hardest language to learn, especially for, English speakers. And so that's a challenge. And I think that's kind of like it unlocks your superpower once you learn the local language. And so we're taking Polish language lessons now. So, prayer for that would be appreciated. And then also, our boys, they've adjusted, but there's still some adjustments going on. And then lastly, the cafe is a special place, not only to us, but to other Protestants, in this community. They also use it as a place to meet and gather. And so, just pray for that space and the cafe and it being really used for God's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. Well, we definitely appreciate you guys coming on with us and spending us a little time over the past couple episodes. And we want to encourage you to reach out to us anytime that you've got some special needs or anything. Definitely know that you have support here in Gahanna, Ohio. Also, those that are listening, we want to challenge you guys to follow everything that's going on at the church by going to shepnaz.org. Also to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Kurt and Holly, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.